In modern clinical medicine, human lives depend on split-second decisions that are augmented by increasingly complex diagnostic technology. Current AI deterrence frameworks were designed for sectors like marketing, where the consequences of an AI failure are largely invisible. Because the environment provides no natural penalty for failure, the governance architecture is forced to construct artificial stakes to make careful behavior rational. Medicine operates under entirely distinct rules. It is a consequence-present environment where the baseline stakes are already catastrophic. The medical system already has absolute accountability. The surgeon's name is on the operative record, and the malpractice insurer tracks the risk. Importing an oversight model designed to manufacture stakes into an environment where failure kills people is a structural flaw. Administrative logic suggests that if catastrophic stakes ensured reliable oversight, medicine would be the safest AI review environment in existence. This baseline shows adverse events occur in a quarter of inpatient encounters. Liability is near certain. 99% of high-risk physicians face malpractice claims by 65. In aviation and nuclear power, human factors account for 70 to 90% of accidents. The consequences in these fields are real, personal, and catastrophic. Personal stakes are empirically insufficient to guarantee reliable oversight of automated systems. The system fails through three invisible mechanisms, beginning with calibration drift. This mechanism functions independently of professional negligence or laziness. It is a cognitive failure. In clinical practice, this manifests as the cosigner problem. When a physician reviews AI recommendations instead of generating independent assessments, their internal standard of care begins to shift. This animation shows the internal reference standard shifting. As the reviewer interacts with the system, their internal baseline bends to match the output the AI produces. The physician still cares deeply and holds the same liability, but their baseline has moved. Because their internal standard has moved in tandem with the algorithm, they can no longer detect when the AI deviates from the true clinical standard. This degradation does not affect motivation, it destroys the expertise required to exercise judgment. Formal oversight forces professionals to become liability-bearing cosigners for decisions they can no longer evaluate. The second mechanism involves the asymmetrical cost of clinical oversight workflows. Challenging an AI recommendation generates friction, workflow delays, mandatory documentation, and social tension with colleagues. Formal approval, by comparison, requires only a single signature. Regardless of the path chosen, the physician's name is permanently attached to the clinical outcome. In complex automated systems, this dynamic is known as the Moral Crumple Zone. The reviewer is forced to absorb the legal and moral force of a systemic failure, regardless of their actual control over the AI. The consequence structure designed to prevent failure provides the institutional cover that allows AI degradation to continue. This leads to the third mechanism, the lethal nature of ceremonial governance. When an accountability layer functions punitively, practitioners stop reporting adverse events. They cover up near misses because reporting creates liability exposure, while silence maintains the formal record. By remaining silent, practitioners carefully maintain the pristine, formal institutional record of adequate, safe, and completely compliant oversight. The resulting paradox is a monitoring architecture that certifies safety while the conditions for failure compound beneath the surface. The formal apparatus declares the system works, and the system confirms the apparatus is in place. Both are wrong about the patient's reality. In environments where automated failure leads to death, ceremonial governance is lethal. Resolving these failure modes requires more than applying existing governance with more force. Three structural modifications address the cognitive and institutional roots of the problem. First, institutional accountability must be detached from a job title and tied to demonstrated expertise. Independent regulatory entities must conduct periodic external calibration assessments. This involves presenting the physician with cases where the AI diverges from clinical standards and measuring if they can detect the error. Second, the operational cost structure must be inverted to favor substantive challenge over formal approval. If calibration results are tied to professional credentials, the long-term cost of drifted calibration rises relative to the friction of overriding the AI. This incentive modification fixes how the institution reacts when external assessment reveals that the physician's internal standard has shifted. Third, the institutional monitoring function must be redesigned to watch the watcher, rather than just monitoring AI outputs. This chart shows how tracking aggregate assessment scores reveals if the staff's internal standards still match clinical reality. When calibration drift appears at elevated rates across a single institution, it triggers a mandatory institutional review. Elevated drift rates point to a failure of the institutional environment, not the individual physician. Current governance architectures ask an irrelevant question: did someone review the AI recommendation? New regulatory frameworks must force institutions to answer: can the reviewer still detect when the AI is wrong? The paperwork was complete, but the patient was harmed. Ceremonial governance is lethal, and the architecture to replace it must be built.